We did it, everybody. Hang on. Let me make sure I can be heard. Yeah, I can. Everybody, we did it. The Bears have a winning record. They are 3-2 now. Let me think. Going back, they were 0-1, then they were 1-1, and then they were 1-2, definitively. Then they were 2-2. Everybody said, it's the Lions. And now here they are, 3-2. And somebody said it in the chat, so I have to say it because it was Rob Ogborn. You couldn't have ice-picked my heart any harder. You couldn't have absolutely nailed the state of the game. This was like watching a 2010 football game. I mean, it really was. I mean, 9 points felt like, I don't want to say an accomplishment for the Raiders, but in the same exact slot as a game that finished 42-49 for crying out loud. Here we were watching a football game that was, it was slow and it was methodical and it was conservative probably. And it involved one team letting their quarterback throw downfield because that was about all they could do really consistently. And then there was another team that wanted to let their quarterback throw, honestly, pretty much as little as possible. And I got to tell you, like, it was a trip back in time. There's a lot of good. There's a lot of bad there. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think it's been said before, right? Winning fixes everything. Like, I'm sitting there listening to I'm still out on him, by the way, but I'm sitting there listening to the presser, listening to Matt Nagy tell me about how, it feels good. It feels good. Like, I get to walk up down the field. Like, I actually get to spend time with the defense now that Bill's calling plays. And I'm like, dadgummit, we've won 2 games, and now I'm drinking the Kool-Aid again. So I'm trying to remind myself here on this instant reaction podcast that we're going to record to take a deep breath because I personally thought the Raiders played pretty badly overall. Like, it's the sort of thing I'm sure you guys probably agree. I do not feel like the Raiders swung with their heaviest fist and the Bears took it. But I do think that there were some really cool things to take away. I mean, not only the fact that Fields delivered 2 in particular that I can remember, the 3rd and 6 to Allen Robinson after coming back on the field after getting hurt, and the 3rd and 11 to Darnell Mooney. Fields delivered some big throws that the Bears needed to stay in command of this game. He was able to be that guy even in small, what's the word? Like, so sorry. I just totally lost my train of thought reading the chat. That's why I'm guzzling down a big old mug of coffee right now before it. But so, this was the sort of game that when I watched it, I thought Fields was good. I didn't think he was incredible, but I think being incredible involves getting chances. I thought that the deep throws he had, like, I'll talk about all this on the podcast when we record it again, but the deep throws he had, the one to Marquise Goodwin, if Goodwin doesn't get I don't want to call it interfered with, because as a receiver, like, what happened was completely legal, but if Marquise Goodwin beats his man a little bit cleaner, that throw was right on target, because I really think he only ended up a little behind it because he was slowed down. And the same one with the ball to Allen Robinson. It looks like it was in the right place if the receiver or if the defensive back didn't jump out and hold him. I mean, there were quite a couple of plays, and like Donnie Brasco said here, the 3rd and 10 you're thinking 3rd and 10 completion. Donnie, I thought you were going to talk about, or Donnie, I thought you were talking about the 3rd and 10 incompletion he had, where Fields took a shotgun snap, hesitated in the pocket, rolled out to his left, tried to coordinate something with Allen Robinson, just extended the play as long as possible before floating a ball up to Allen that unfortunately Robinson couldn't come up with. I mean, there were a whole bunch of little things that Fields did. He didn't have some kind of massive costly turnover. Like, there was a lot of positive to Fields' game, and while there wasn't the huge A++ like fantasy point massive plays, there's a lot of things that as a rookie I thought were incredibly cool to see. Not only his toughness, which can sometimes be overrated. You would obviously rather a quarterback never get hit than show that they're super tough. Joe Burrow's in the hospital because he didn't want to slide, for instance, which gutty game by Burrow, tough, Cannot believe that the Packers' voodoo magic somehow came through with another win for them. You have got to be kidding me. How many kicks did Crosby have to miss for the Bengals to just oaf up the rest of their chances? Frustrating. But even so, I love the fact that Fields was able to gut out the rest of the game, if only so that we didn't have to watch Andy for the rest of it and cross our fingers that Fields was okay. But a whole lot of good things. Yeah, duh Bears, Robbie. Let's see. Houston Carson. Can't wait to talk through that one when we get the all-22, because it looked to me like Houston Carson just recognized the cover 2 hole shot that was coming at him as a dime backer that he is and got over the top of the ball. Really, really heady play on his part. But yeah, it'll be really cool to see what happens. So let me see. Somebody asked, Donnie, was that any word on Mooney? So it looked as if Mooney got back in the game. He got hurt. And then he came back into the game, so I imagine it was some sort of small time thing. Matt Nagy didn't mention him at the end of the game, so tend to think that's a good thing, but who knows? Maybe it slipped his mind, because I know Nagy only mentioned Ifedi, Caleb Johnson, and somebody whose name I had never heard of on the roster. It was like an Ichiro or something like that. But so a lot of good. A lot of bad. At this point, we're waiting for Brandon, so I don't live in a sportsbook state. I live in Texas. That's why I used to get a whole lot of flack for pennants that you can't see, because one was Bears and one was Cowboys, because my mom's a huge Cowboys fan, so I need to at least pay them respect. But so, let's see. Yeah, no, what was that case saying? Oh no, are the White Sox blowing it? I thought it was 1-0 right now. Are they losing at this point? I know they're down 2-0, but hey, all it takes is one win to reset a baseball team back on track. But so, yeah, Brandon's coming back from the sportsbook and has been for a little bit. So he had to get all of his bets finalized before he was going to jump on. So we are being patient, but I'm more than happy talking with you guys until he gets here. So feel free to fire some questions away. We can talk through everything, and then we'll go ahead and record the podcast. Overall, by the way, I thought, yeah, exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth, Donnie. I thought Mac was awesome. I mean, it looked as if Mac decided that he was going to make a point to the kids, Derek Carr's kids, that apparently wear Mac's jersey and no Mac's pass rush moves. I mean, this was the sort of thing where this was the sort of game that you wanted to see from him. Maybe Mac just loves week 5, because this time last year he had his huge game against Tampa Bay. But either way, he's got 6 sacks in 5 games. Sack production isn't everything, but man, did he come through when he needed to. Thank you so much, Sam Scavo, for jumping in. But yeah, either way, cool game from him, especially needed, because Derek Carr tends to kind of shrivel up when he gets hit a couple times. And I'll tell you what, the Bears, so their defense played really well, and you're not going to hear me say anything else. At the same time, in the world of it's better to be lucky than good, that Bryan Edwards drop, oh, that was bad. I think we can all agree. Like, if that was our team, ooh, that was really bad. But it helped the Bears on, I think that was a 3rd down, too. So, might have helped them get the ball back. Like, there were plenty of things that went the Raiders' way. I mean, obviously, you go on Twitter, and it's always going to be a matter of the Bears got screwed, or basically pick a fan base, that team got screwed. But overall, I mean, the only real complaint that I have, and we will get into this, but the only thing that I would really complain about is that I personally thought that the Bill Lazor led, because it looked like Lazor. I mean, looked like a standard Lazor play call game. Thought he ran the ball a little bit too much on 2nd and longs in particular, and I really hated the 3rd and 1. He had 2 3rd and 1s where he just ran the ball up the middle. The Bears got neither of them, and I get it. The Bears have a really good running game, or at least a better running game than I think any of us really anticipated. I can't believe the amount of, let's see. Oh, I'll talk you through it, I mean, no problem. I've even got a video on Gibson's sophomore step that is somewhere on the channel. But so, like, talking through the let's see, where were we? Oh, yeah, Bears offense and so on and so forth. I think part of the magic with running game nowadays, which, look, you look analytically and everybody says the most efficient route in football is the deep one, right? The one where you take the snap, receiver heads down the field, you throw it, you get 30 yards. So there's an aspect to offensive efficiency metrics that needs just an ever so slight grain of salt, because obviously you want to use like vertical routes whenever you can. Everybody wants to throw a touchdown every play. That's not a surprise. But I do think that just because the Bears are running the ball well on first and second down doesn't mean that they need to think that somehow, because they're averaging 5 yards per carry, that matters when you bring 7 offensive linemen on the field, which, if memory serves, were Jason Peters and Cody Whitehair and Sam Mustipher and James Daniels and Isaiah Wilkinson and Alex Bars and Arlington Hambright, if I saw it correctly. Like, those 7 offensive line are not exactly my personal handpick squad for go out there and get it on 3rd and 1, but laser trotted that out the second time. The first time, I think they just didn't get the yardage. I don't know. The trouble is that every time you say something like this, there are plenty of people who turn it into, well, he just wants to pass. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do. But I also am perfectly fine running it on 3rd and 1. I just think you can do more than a one-directional run that only goes up the middle. Even if you want to bring 7 offensive linemen on the field, that's great. Pull a wide receiver across the field so that the quarterback kind of has a triple option choice where they can shovel past the ball, or not a shovel, it's a pop pass, I think is what I don't ever know what that thing's called. The jet pass, where he pops it up forward to Darnell Mooney. If he likes Mooney come around the side, he can give it to Khalil Herbert, who then goes around the left. And if he wants to keep it and sneak it, he can go for it. Like, there's a whole lot of things like that where, I mean, Jay Sanders even talking about, like, a fullback, for instance. Like, you can do that too. I just think that there is better, like, in the playbook than handing the ball off on 3rd and 1. And frankly, I thought we stopped doing this in like 2013, which is exactly why this looked like a football game from 2010 comment really stuck out to me. Like, I kind of got the impression we were almost giving those away in the back half, and maybe kept the Raiders around a little longer than we wanted to, or than any of us would have liked. But at the same time, if you've been following my work and what I think about the situation, you probably know I don't really care about the Bears' wins and losses. It's super fun, but at the end of the day, I care more about Fields' development than I do W's and L's. Even so, I think this was a big game. This is the kind of game that if the Bears are going to attempt to sneak into the playoffs, if they're going to try to steal one of those 7th or 6th seed spots, I find myself thinking that this game is huge, because with this game in their pocket, thank you so much, your Bucket Stats, Quentin. Great to see you. Hey, thanks for jumping in. But so, with that having happened, we are at the stage of the game now where they basically just have to win one of their next 3. And they're tough games. Let's be really honest. They take on the Packers at home. They take on the Packers. Then they take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa Bay, if memory serves. And they should almost 100% lose that game. But, I mean, hey, you never know. Games aren't played on paper. And then 3rd game, they take on the 49ers, now starting Trey Lance, who struggled a little bit, especially offensively, against a very solid Arizona team that's basically just beating everybody nowadays. But so, all that to say that there's a shot here that the Bears come out of this 4-game stretch 4-4. And if they come out of this 4-4, all they got to do is find a way between the Lions game, the 2 Lions game, Vikings game, Giants game, and then the rest of the schedule, find a way to get 4 more, and then they're at 8-9. Let alone they get 5 more, then they're probably 9-8, and they might just steal that 2nd spot. I don't know. We'll see. The Bears still have an extremely hard schedule, and yet at the same time, the game today in Minnesota, I don't know about what you guys thought, That was sad. that Lions Vikings game was pretty tough. The moments that Red Zone, because I basically just chilled out and watched the game on Red Zone. Every time they came back to that Lions Vikings game, it felt like both teams wanted to lose. And right now, at least based on the way that the Bears have been playing for the last 2 weeks, I can't help but feel as if the Bears are a team that, quote-unquote, wants to win just as much as they, quote-unquote, want to lose. Thank you so much, Dank Shots. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. That is so kind of you. All right. I love the comment about the Lions being cursed, by the way, Dudeski, because it feels like it. I mean, Jay Sanders, it's funny you say 0-17. I remember, so I do a whole bunch of picking stuff for a site through Tally, or for Windy City Gridiron through Tally site, and at one point, Windy City asked me to do the worst record, right? They were like, who's going to have the worst record? And I was like, I don't want to be ridiculous. I don't think it's the Texans. I think the Texans are too much the obvious choice, and every time you feel like you know who's going to be the worst record in football, it's probably not. I think it's the Lions, because the Lions have an outrageously hard schedule, and I think the Texans, with the Jags in their division, and the Colts, who you never know, and so on and so forth, basically just went through a bunch of mental gymnastics, and I mean, goodness gracious, it looks like the Windy City Gridiron, Jay Sanders. But so, after all this, the Lions are 0-5. The Texans, they're not 2-3, right? Are they 1-4? But they have a win. That's all. And they should have had another one today. Like, I don't want to call it an impressive comeback from Mac Jones's part, but hey, he and his team did grind their way back into the game and ultimately come out on top. But yeah, I mean, like, there's a whole lot of those that I'm like, the Texans winning games, I don't think they're going to win a lot, but they're obviously not going to lose every single game in the football season. The Lions, on the other hand, have a tough hill to climb, and they had their chance today. They had their chance against the Ravens, and they're coming out on the wrong end of even the low-scoring ones. I don't know. It is rough. All right, let me quickly send something off to Brandon to get him in here, because I swear, football people and technology, am I right? But anyways, I'm obviously gonna stay here, but you're gonna hear some clacking. Let's see. I still really can't, just talking as I go, believe that the Lions managed to lose again. I mean, I guess in a sense it's the most obvious thing in the world, but it was just wild to me. Oh man. Seriously, whoever thought the talking Adamola, I thought that was so funny, by the way. Just Akeem Grant hitting the Bears, running, and and just catching everything. Like, I love the attitude, plus Grant looks fast, but it was hilarious watching some of these where I was like, I'm not a special teams guru, and even I know not to catch a punt in the end zone, for crying out loud. Like, there were a couple decisions Grant made that were nothing short of weird. And I don't think you're cutting him, obviously, but because I heard some people say that on Twitter. They were like, cut him. No. But you definitely need to tell Jakeem Grant, hey, your roster spot's not in danger. Cool off. Like, you better cool off. Just a second. Yeah, I think so. So, what is that? Dudeski says, first game here, probably excited to make a play. Yeah. I mean, that's my assumption anyways, is that he was just overexcited. Either way, it was funny. I mean, hey, the goofiest part about that punt return, where he caught it in the end zone, was that he got back out to the 19 after hesitating for a long freaking time. Like, he waited around before finally making that decision and still got 19 yards. Like, he's quick. he's definitely, I'd say, the most dangerous looking punt returner that we've had since Cohen, which is not long ago. But gosh, I don't know when we're gonna get Cohen back. But either way, it was it was complicated. Like he was definitely probably one of the downs. I think he could bounce back into an up here fairly soon, he being Jakeem Grant, but he isn't the kind of guy that I look at and say, or I would look at him and tell him, like, take the good ones and then fair catch the one. Like, here are our fair catch rules, follow our fair catch rules, and we'll be fine. So, I don't know. Either overall, if anything, was that I was really impressed. I mean, so you guys have heard me talk about Khalil Herbert. I like Khalil Herbert a lot. Have liked Khalil Herbert, and today was just more so. Like, Khalil Herbert looks awesome, you know? I personally thought that Khalil Herbert looked quick. He might have actually looked faster than Montgomery. In fact, I would just go out on a limb and say he did. Like, Montgomery has much more ability to fight through tackles. Damian Williams, much more versatile. He can take a shotgun handoff. I mean, okay, shotgun handoff isn't that complicated. But Damian Williams can work a screen just as well as he can work an underneath check down, just as well as he can work a handoff, just as well as he can work anything else. Damian Williams is going to deliver you the same level of quality on just about any play call. Khalil Herbert, though, I would argue is probably the best outside zone runner on the team. Like, really, I think he is. Khalil Herbert makes Montgomery look like a power back, because I've always kind of thought that Montgomery makes more sense on an inside zone kind of setup, where Herbert is... Montgomery, for instance, likes to measure out and look at the hole and this, that, and the other, whereas Herbert just goes. And so the general rule, for those who haven't heard... okay, let me see if I can just do this with my hands. Can everybody see this, right? So you've got forward, that's my thumbs, left, and right, okay? So the general way that you run in the... like when you run outside zone, is that you find the hole and you either bang it up the back end. Let's say we're going this way, right? You bang it up the back end, you bend the ball through the hole, or you bounce the ball outside further out. And it might actually be bang it through the hole, bend it back up the backside, and bounce on the other hand. But you get the idea. Herbert makes these decisions and just rips through the field. Let me see fast. But yeah, he's quick. I love it because to me, that's exactly the kind of play that I think he... Gary, what do you mean? Am I hearing myself? I sure hope I'm hearing myself. Is there some kind of... Wait, what's going on? Everybody's saying pause. Let's see. Yeah, Case. I got trashed in fantasy. There's nothing I could do. It was bad. I forgot to set my lineup and immediately was like, oh no, this is going to be trouble. But so, let's see. Gary J, feel free to let me know what's going on. But... we should be about... Okay, perfect. Yeah, bang it up the back end. That makes sense. But so, let's see. Perfect. Great to know. That's great. Because I saw all the pause comments, and I was like, oh, Daquan, thank you. You're right. Dadgummit, that stuff always flies over my head. I don't know whether it's like an innocence thing or what's going on, but I missed a Deshaun Watson massage parlor joke 2 weeks ago on stream. Like, goodness gracious, I was really asking for it, but yeah, we'll draw it on the next stream. Gracious, I've just gotta watch innuendos. Apparently, everybody, get your laughs out, okay? Get your laughs out. Let me see. Hang on. Yeah, I gotta explain to Brandon how Discord works. Yeah. No, no. This is... There he is. Finally. All right. That worked. There you go. He's on. PJ, you're right. Unfortunately, I do. No, no worries. Put your camera on whenever you want. You're already live on stream, and the whole chat's making fun of me because I just demonstrated outside zone, bang, bend, bounce, and said, you banging up the back end, and missed it for 10 minutes. So, yet another moment of something just going way over my head. But yeah, feel free to get yourself set up. Oh, okay, and I'll just keep answering questions. So, Khalid, we'll talk about this on the podcast a little more. If I was going to grade Fields, so I like to do 2 grades for Fields every time. I try to grade him as a rookie, and I try to grade him as an overall quarterback. And as an overall quarterback, I don't know, C plus. I mean, it wasn't as if Fields did anything wild. And yet, from a rookie perspective, he did a great job reining himself in, not doing anything that was ridiculous. I think he does need to realize when he can't do his spin, because his spin is slow. And it's not helping him. Like, he's getting popped, which is not good. Like, for a reason, whereas Damian Williams breaks a tackle. But on the rookie scale, I'd say... I don't know, Brandon, what do you think? B plus? Like, wasn't it, he played the conservative game. He hit some third downs that he needed to, and his team didn't really give him a lot of ability to help dig himself out of early holes because they seemed like they just really wanted to run it on second and long all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I can't imagine, honestly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was telling the group before you got on, Brandon, that I feel like the Raiders did not play well. Like, that might be the biggest key, you know? Where that's when you're excited to come away 3-2. Always easier to fix things on a winning weekend than a losing weekend. Maybe it's the same. Who cares? But it feels better. Anyways. But definitely you could really hear me trying to coax the Kool-Aid out of myself. You know what I mean? But
yeah, there's the Robert optimism for you.
Look, you heard me, Brandon. My biggest tweet today was about patting Andy, or like tipping the cap to Andy Dalton's one throw of the game. So I take positivity where I can find it, even if it's extra work. Ready to go?
Let me make sure. Let me fix my internet real quick.
If it helps, you don't have to be. Say that again. Well, whatever internet fixing it sounds like you're doing, it seems needed because it seems as if he's just cut out really hard. And yeah, Case, I've been trying to think about that for a little while. It's funny you mentioned sponsorships. Like, we just crossed the 10K mark, so congratulations to all of y'all. Y'all are the greatest. Like, super cool to see that 5-digit number. But definitely, like, I don't know how I want to work in sponsorships, because if you know or you're looking to sponsor, let me know. But I want to make sure that it fits the channel. So things like somebody offered a 3-minute ad read spot, for instance, and I was like, 3 minutes, it's a long time, especially for
very long
videos. Time. So we'll figure it all out as a community and a group, but it's on the mind. I just want to make sure it's the right partner, which I'm sure plenty of people before me have said. But I want to mean it. Brandon, what's going on with the internet? It sounded like you cut out bad there.
Yeah, I had to switch. I was on the wrong internet.
It might be better if you want to turn your video off, because it seems like it's struggling to come through anyways.
Okay.
Your call, though.
That's fine.
Let me get you all turned up. Speak.
Hello. Testing. Testing.
Testing. There you go.
Testing. Fields, please never spin. Please never spin.
Ready to roll?
Yep.
Let's do this. All right. What's going on, everybody? All right. Whatever sound you just made, don't make that again.
Hold on, let me clear my throat.
We were so early in this show that I was like, nope. Perfect.
Bail.
We're out. We're resetting. This is what it looks like to record a podcast, everybody.
Let me see if I can mute myself.
You don't have to. It was mostly just to give you a hard time. But let's do this. 3, 2.
Okay, I was muted.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Bear With Me, a Chicago Bears podcast hosted by yours truly, Robert Schmitz, right here on the Windy City Gridiron podcasting channel. And I am joined today by my Rule of 3 co-host, Brandon Robinson, as we are going to dive through a big win that puts the Bears at 3-2 on the season over the Las Vegas Raiders in the Death Star. Sounds like it was a great day from the pressers that we got the chance to listen to. And Brandon, I don't know about you, I'm feeling pretty good. Weird game. Somebody in my chat said it really well. This was like watching a game out of 2010, but one that ended up on the right side of the win-loss column. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean this is one of those games that brings me back to when I used to coach. And when I used to coach, we used to have this 12-hour rule where after a win, only positive things for 12 hours. After 12 hours, then you can focus on some of the negative things. But the wins are few and far in between. So when you get a win, you have to celebrate. And I think that's exactly what type of game this was.
Absolutely. Sounded like it. I mean, so I got the chance to actually listen to all of the pressers, and Jesper Horsted, Damian Williams, Matt Nagy, and Justin Fields all made some kind of comment about this being the loudest and most excited locker room that they had seen this season, which is hilarious to me because I guess I would have expected a little more out of the Bengals game. I don't know. They were juiced. They were jazzed. So it seems like it's a win that meant a lot to the team. But as far as what you saw, Brandon, and where you see this season, I'll hit you with a hard question off the bat. Did this change anything? Did you see things that you didn't expect? Or do you feel like the Bears kind of got away with one?
I mean, going back to what you just said about the players, I would expect it. Because all of the players, the coaching staff, everybody knows that the Bears were big underdogs in this game. They might say they don't, but they do. They 100% do. The Bengals game, they were a little favored, and they still have that Bengals narrative to them. The Raiders came out fast. Derek Carr was being talked about in the MVP race. So, I mean, I feel like they should think that this is a big win for them, especially the fact that it being on the road and whatnot. As far as how they played, I 100% think that it was a squeak 'em out kind of game, especially on offense. I don't know how many 2nd and 10 runs they had. It seemed like they had 8 or 9. I tried to count before I got on. Didn't even have time to count how many times they ran on 2nd and 10. The defense played phenomenally. I was overly impressed with how they played. The pass rush really got home. Khalil Mack was playing with like his hair is on fire or something. I know him and Derek Carr are best friends, and you could tell that he just really wanted to get after him. He was talking smack to him every time he got back to the backfield. You could tell that they probably had some exchange before the game that really got him going in this game, which is very, very nice to see.
Whatever happened, whether it really was just that Khalil Mack loves Derek Carr, knows him personally, and wanted to play up to that task. Let's get that every week, Brandon, because Khalil Mack was everything his reputation has told us he should be. He was that and more today. I also, look, with every positive thing, it gives us an opportunity to just squeeze a negative thing into the podcast, right? And I will say that my dad has told me for years, back when I was a young thing all the way up to here, which it's not like I'm old, but he would always say whenever something worked out for the Bears, he would say, it's better to be lucky than good. And watching the Raiders miss Darren Waller wide open on, I think that was a 4th and 4, Bryan Edwards drop a 40-yard pass that hit him in the hands. He had no business dropping that. And a couple other mistakes that the Raiders had. I mean, for crying out loud, the Raiders the Raiders committed 5 holding penalties, only 2 of which counted because 4 or 3 of them happened on either offsetting penalty downs or 2 holds in one play. The Raiders played really badly. If I was a Raiders fan, I'd be mad because I get it. I'm sure you know, just like I do, Brandon, Derek Carr plays his best football in September, and it slowly peters off from there. It feels like we start every season with Derek Carr in Derek Carr's pretty good. Maybe this is his year, and then they end up 6-10, or in this case, it'd be closer to 6-10, 6-11, 7-10, maybe. But I didn't expect them to turn into a pumpkin over a week, and yet it felt like they kind of did. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it really did seem that way, especially on offense. I know they've had trouble with the offensive line, and you really saw that happen. Like, they just switched out their right tackle to Brandon Parker. He really struggled against Khalil Mack. I can't say enough good things about Robert Quinn.
Seriously,
he's just tremendous to watch. Honestly, if I had to pick one player on defense to watch besides Jalen Johnson, it would probably be Robert Quinn. He's playing fat, and the thing is about him, besides the fact that he's getting to the quarterback, because you'll hear a lot about how sacks don't necessarily determine how much an edge rusher is getting to the quarterback's pressures do, but he's getting home on sacks, he's getting pressures, and not only that, he's getting TFLs, he's making all the tackles. This whole entire D line is playing very, very impressive. It's kind of funny because I thought Eddie Goldman was going to have a big, big impact, but it just seems like everybody's overshadowing him so far, which is it's nice to see, honestly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what's been hilarious, Brandon, is that in typical the way it works in real life fashion, right? The season he's having this year, I feel like we would have expected it last year and expected to have to take a season like last year on the back end of Quinn's deal, because that's what you do when you buy a 32 going on 33-year-old pass rusher, right? Well, it's been the opposite. Quinn looks like everything he used to be again, which is hilarious because then you look at him as he stands there between plays and he looks visually pretty old. You know what I mean? But that ball gets snapped, he is buzzing around the edge. I mean, if the Bears can keep this up, I mean, they did this without Akeem Hicks, for instance. I thought that the back end of the coverage was, I can't wait to see it on all 22. Maybe they were more hit and miss. Maybe they were even better than we realized that they were. But I know that there were, what would you say?
I think that is definitely the case because it just seemed like Derek Carr really didn't know where he wanted to go with the football, which is surprising because out of all the quarterbacks, that's just usually what he does. Like if he has some deterrence, people that are coming after him, it's because he's checking down the ball. But right. It seemed like he didn't even know where to go with his checkdowns today. And I don't know. I might go on a rant here, but it just seemed like CBS had no idea what to do with their cameras. You could never see down the field. You're not getting a single shot of all 22. Like, I don't know. I don't know if this is my first time watching CBS this year, but man, it was just visually unappealing to watch a lot. I don't know if you saw the same thing, but you never got to see what they were doing in coverage. You never got to see any of the route combinations or anything.
Well, so that, Brandon, is something that I feel like that has been a I can't unsee it feeling since I really started watching all 22, right? Where when I used to watch the game, yeah, I was engrossed by just watching the quarterback stand there and seeing how close the pass rush got to him. And now I sit here and I'm like, where was Darren Waller? Where did Renfro go? What does Eddie Jackson do on a snap-to-snap basis? How did DeAndre Houston Carson jump that cover 2 hole shot? Where was he? Can I see it? For crying out loud, like it's I was yeah,
I was going insane for that. A guy makes an interception, and the only thing you get to see is him diving for the interception. You don't see at all where he came from. You just see him making the interception. Like, oh, nice play. It's like, well, was it a nice play? Was it overthrown? Like, did he break on the ball?
And I mean, that's the thing, right? Because based on the nothing replay we had, it looks like it was a little of both, right? I've seen plenty of safeties, and DHC in this case doesn't really count as a safety. You and I know that he's more of a dime backer. But I've seen plenty of defensive backs that don't even get there, right? Where it's the trailing corner that is in the frame and a safety kind of running up, right? But it also did feel like the only reason that Houston Carson was able to get his hands on the ball is because it was about a meter out in front of the receiver, which, hey, again, better to be lucky than good, right? That if the ball was right on target or even a little bit underthrown vertically, chances are the wide receiver can at least put his body in front of it, and Houston Carson never gets in front of there. But we take the interception anyways. The only real problem then, maybe, do you want to talk offense at this point, or do we want to talk offense in a little bit? Because I feel like the offense was every bit positive. If you want to talk about Khalil Herbert getting 75 yards, Damian Williams 64 yards, a lot of the creative things, and frankly, surprising execution moments that I thought they had, as it was frustrating. You already hinted at the 2nd and long runs. It felt like the Bears were trying to make Justin Fields play the most difficult game possible sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and what a lot of people don't necessarily understand why 2nd and long is, like, 2nd and long runs are such a bad thing. It's because for the play to be quote unquote successful, it's very, very difficult. Because a 2nd and 10 run, and say you run it for 5 yards, that is not considered a successful play, which sounds crazy because you got 5 yards, but it's not considered a successful play because a 3rd and 5, which is the next down, isn't an ideal situation. So if you're not setting up for an ideal situation, then that is considered a bad thing to do. So, I mean, being it that, like, your average quarterback, his pass attempt is somewhere between 7.5 and 8. It's usually a better thing to pass in that scenario versus just run it. Because, I mean, just getting 5 yards is an accomplishment because there are few running backs that are averaging 5 yards per carry. So I just think there are a lot of other things that they could have done. I completely understand not wanting to just leave a rookie out to dry because if you incomplete the pass, you're obviously on 3rd and 10. But it just seemed like they really got away from RPOs. I think they could have ran some screens on 2nd and 10. I didn't see any of those. I was just very underwhelmed with the play calling. But if we're gonna try to stick to some of the positives, I was overly impressed with Khalil Herbert. It seemed like the Bears were overly impressed with Khalil Herbert because Damian Williams was the one that was starting. At the end of the game, you could fully understand who was now the starter. That was Khalil Herbert.
Oh,
and
yeah.
why that is so important is when you hit on these day 3 running backs, that makes it so you don't have to pay your running backs because you see all these running backs that are getting paid that keep getting hurt. Saquon Barkley is a guy that's going to have to get paid. Just got hurt again, tripping on somebody. And so when you got guys that just show amazing bursts like Khalil Herbert does, you just love to see it.
Right. I mean, we'll leave the Monty conversation for another time purely because I could technically qualify it an off-season topic, Brandon, but the truth is that I feel like Monty has just made fairly so many fans out of his never say die attitude to running. It feels like that untackleable running back is such an icon in Chicago that when Montgomery slots right into it, like, yeah, I don't really want to pay him like the $8 to $9 million a year that I think he may warrant, even $5 million a year over a couple years. But I also don't want to kick that hornet's nest. Instead, I'll point to the Khalil Herbert bang, bend, bounce outside zone running where he looked quick. I think nobody's going to question that he looked faster than David Montgomery, which is not a slight to Montgomery. He just looked fast and ferocious, you know? Wherever there was a hole, he took it, and he took it as far as he could. Does that get him 11 yards? Maybe. 9 yards? Sure. 6 yards? Okay. 1 yard? All right. I mean, Herbert was just everything you would expect out of an outside zone runner. And I don't know about you, Brandon, I always kind of thought that they planned on having Montgomery be more of an inside zone runner. So when they switched to outside zone, somebody like Herbert ending up in the pipeline made all the sense in the world. Even so, I think you'd agree, it's a lot easier to write that down on paper as we did it, we got Khalil Herbert, running game solved, than actually seeing it in a real game, in an away game against the Las Vegas Raiders, where he totes it for 4.2 per carry and ends up being the Bears' leading rusher on the day, you know?
Right, yeah, exactly. I think it was a tremendous – and the thing is that you like to see is they're targeting a day 3 running back that fits the scheme. Like, you'll get a lot of times where teams will just draft a guy at a position they feel like they need, but it won't fit the scheme at all. Khalil Herbert was perfect for the scheme that you would imagine they keep running, which is outside zone. It's hard to find running backs that are in college that run outside zone because there's so many teams that run spread, and usually with spread teams you're going to get inside zone versus outside zone, which is a completely different running style.
Absolutely. And, you know, we're talking about running styles, but I feel like I have to go back, Brandon, because I can't get these play calls out of my head, some of them. And I think, I really don't try to be somebody who gets on the mic and just complains about play calling, especially because, I saw this on Twitter, right? Plenty of people making the assertion, 100% serious, Matt Nagy's calling the plays today. Why? Because some of them aren't working. Bill Lazor's play calls would work. Like, it must be Matt Nagy. And I don't think that's the case. Even so, some of these, let alone the 2nd and 10 runs, which are a problem in and of themselves, because you can't effectively run a play action threat on 3rd and 8. I think you know that, right? Where you're not going to fool any defender. You're not going to pull any linebacker when you use a play action handoff from under center on 3rd and 8. But the 3rd and 1 play calls really, I did not like all of the inside running. I can't remember if I've said this on the podcast yet, but somebody described this game as a throwback to 2010. And I remember back there in 2010 being like, running up the middle doesn't work. Why does everybody do this on 3rd and 1? It's like a free stop. And yet the Bears gave away 2 of those when they were up 14-3. And it's just something I would love to see the Bears move away from. They can still run the ball. I know a whole lot of people they just trust Justin Fields so to the point where they're like, let's just throw the ball every down. I'm not there yet, but I do think that you could do a lot more, whether it's pulling a wide receiver across and potentially using a pop pass to get him running around on the edge, or a Fields edge read where Khalil Herbert can take the ball to the left, or Fields pulls it, runs to the right. There's a lot more that you can do than just taking a snap from under center with 7 offensive linemen lined up, which, by the way, is the class of Alex Bars, Arlington Hambright, Isaiah Wilkinson, and then the rest of the Bears offensive line. So not exactly the grandest running offensive line in the country. And then they fail on 3rd and 1. You know what I mean? Like, this doesn't feel like a successful strategy going forward.
Right. Because the thing is, you're telling the defense that you're running it by putting 7 offensive linemen out on the field. What do you expect? Now, the one thing that I will say is I feel for this coaching staff on these 3rd and short, these 4th and short plays, because they don't have any wide receivers that block. Allen Robinson does not block a soul. He's lucky I don't have more time. I don't want to waste my Monday, because I would just watch tape and put up clips of him not blocking, because he just doesn't block. So, in my idea as a defensive coordinator, the one play that I don't want to see you run on 3rd and short is a pitch outside, because that means that our cornerbacks have to tackle the running backs, which the Bears have run numerous times, but the wide receivers just don't block. So this coaching staff's probably thinking, all right, well, let's get them off the field and let's bring on some linemen. But the thing is, when you do that, everybody knows that you're running the football. So, I mean, it's a really, really tough spot. I would love if they could just go empty and then try to run the ball that way, like on a QB draw or some sort of jet sweep action, especially off Bash, running that type of play versus just QB power. I think they would be much better off doing that type of stuff.
And yet, Brandon, you and I both know that the primary reason that they're struggling to run out of empty is because the offensive linemen that they have, they're struggling bad enough. I mean, I think they tried a quarterback draw, and it looked like Cody Whitehair got blown up so badly that the draw just completely puttered. And instead of Fields taking the ball, running straight forward, he instead had to shuffle around somebody, tried to spin move, and got popped. But I don't know. It is such a catch-22. If anything, and I'm not normally a 12 personnel, let alone a 13 personnel guy, but I almost appreciate the fact that the Bears are just trying to line up with so many potential blockers that instead of approaching offense, Brandon, like they're thinking, oh, how many passing threats are we going to pull out of this? It's becoming more, ooh, bet you don't know how many people we're going to block with, and it's weird. It's definitely unique, but I guess at least they're trying to address their primary problem, which showed up again in the late second half, or in the late first half, where they did a standard 9-step drop. And you tell me, did Fields get too deep on that sack where Crosby and I think it might have been Ngakoue met at Fields and just ended the quarter, or did our tackles just blow it that badly?
Well, the tackles 100% blew it, but they also that's what those guys are. Those guys are speed rushers. They can bend around. And the one thing that our offensive tackles struggle against, edges that can actually bend. And on top of that, Fields has struggled consistently with not sliding up into the pocket. I think one thing that you could take away that Mac Jones does do well, one of the things that he does really well, is he slides up in the pocket. Now, I don't know if it's Justin Fields not having necessarily confidence in his offensive line to slide up, or he just isn't comfortable at all doing it. I don't know what the problem is, but he just refuses to slide up in the pocket, which, I mean, that is troublesome, honestly.
It's troublesome, but at the same time, I also have seen enough rookies play to know that it's for an offensive or for a quarterback coming out of Ohio State, where I don't know how much of his 2020 tape you watched, but his interior offensive line, for what you would expect out of an offensive line or interior piece that had Josh Myers on it, I thought they really struggled. Like, I don't think that Justin Fields necessarily had a great environment to learn to step up, because he either didn't need it or he took pressure from in front of him when at OSU most of the time. But that's being very specific. I mean, it's kind of like how Justin Fields struggles with anticipation because he's always had a howitzer of an arm, and Chris Olave was just open enough that he could throw whatever he felt like it. I don't know. I'm willing to wait a couple more games, especially with, I mean, to talk about a positive thing, Brandon, we could transition into things Fields has shown us he's growing in. I don't know about you. I feel like Fields' timing is looking a lot better. Way less hesitation, especially on, for instance, a couple of his throws to Allen Robinson where he just took the snap, 1-step drop, and rifled the ball to the outside edge. That's exactly the kind of growth you want to see in a quarterback that took 9 sacks just 2 weeks ago, which feels like half a year for some reason, but only 2 weeks ago he hesitated so much that he got sacked more than he threw the ball, so he's taking steps in the right direction, you know?
That's one thing I actually thought was really interesting about the game, was on multiple occasions from under center, they did non-play action 3-step drops. And in today's NFL, that is just not what you see at all. But the one thing I will say is if you have a quarterback that throws with anticipation and gets the ball out quick, it's fine. You don't need play action. Because the thing is about those plays is you're throwing it outside of the numbers and you're throwing it quick. So the linebackers and safeties don't matter at all. Your quarterback just needs to throw with anticipation and trust his receivers to get open. And I honestly think that's what you saw in this game versus the Browns game. He's not waiting for his receivers to get open. He's hitting that third step, hitching forward, and throwing the ball.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's one of those games that, so I think Matt Nagy described it in his post-game presser as a back alley brawl. Like, this was a test of guts and mettle, and I mean, nobody exemplified that more than Justin Fields, who not only took another hit, very similar, if not a little scarily similar to that Clemson shot he took where a slow spin move got him smoked in the hip, but he also hyperextended his left knee, even owning up to that in his post-game presser, and yet he soldiered on. I mean, this was a test of guts. The Bears seemed to come out on top. I mean, it's one of those where you could see clear steps forward. I don't know. I'm trying not to drink the Kool-Aid too hard because they go up against a Packers team that, you could say all the any given Sunday stuff. I'm not sure they're ready to beat them yet. But it was definitely a game where, given the way it played out, it was cool to see on all fronts,
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're gonna take the win and move forward because how this division's looking with the Packers up top and all the defensive injuries they could possibly have, I mean, you're going to take the win because this division's 100% up for grabs. And I mean, you're gonna take the developments from the quarterback because at the end of the day, that's what's most important. That's what's most important is the development of your rookie quarterback. People have way too high expectations of rookie quarterbacks nowadays, which is kind of crazy. You need to take every little bit of every little positive of what you get and just move forward. Because at the end of the day, that's what you want to keep doing is stacking those positives.
Absolutely. And with Fields now, what is this? So he is counting the Bengals game as major action. I think this puts Fields at 3-1 as a quarterback. So, solid start. He's now got a meat grinder with the Packers and the 49ers and Tampa Bay coming up, but we're still on the Raiders game, and after this break, we'll talk a little more about it. Brandon, I'll see you on the other end. And we are back with Bear With Me, talking through the Las Vegas Raiders game right after it happened with Brandon Robinson, my Rule of Three co-host. Now, Brandon, there is one thing that I haven't mentioned as we talk through some of the things we feel like we might need to see change as before the Packers game happens. I want to start with Jakeem Grant. We just cut a punt returner that wouldn't catch anything, and now we have a punt returner that seemingly will not catch anything. What did you think? Was that a little ridiculous or what?
I mean, honestly, I know they're in Vegas, so these two would probably enjoy it. But I really wish they would leave Jakeem Grant and Chris Tabor, leave them both in Las Vegas. Just be like, hey, guys, you're not allowed on the plane on the way back. Or just the worst performance you could possibly imagine. Just don't come back on the plane. We're going to leave you guys here. We'll get new guys and fly back. Because I've never – why would you ever return a punt while in your own end zone? It just makes – no sense. Like I don't know the rules, but I think you could get a safety by doing that. If your team is committing holding while you're catching the punt return, that might be a safety because there's no way that you could mark it back any further. So I have no idea what he was doing. I know he talked about Devin Hester, so I don't know if he was trying to live up to that bill. I don't know why would you even try, considering the fact that a team traded you just to get you off the books. He lucked out quite a bit, which is a good thing. But I just don't really understand. I don't understand how he's allowed to do it. Like after because he returned it from the 1, which you don't do, and then he returned it from his own end zone. So it was just 2 cardinal sins of punt returning. You put your heels on the 5-yard line, and you don't move backwards. If the ball goes over your head, it goes over your head and into the end zone.
Man, you say that. 20. I've heard put your heels in the 15. I've heard put your heels on the 20 before. I mean, like, everybody's got their own definition for where you don't step backwards. But either way, Jakeem Grant fielding some of the punts he did was nothing short of a little ridiculous. And We'll see what happens. I mean, it's the goofy here and there about it is that Jakeem Grant certainly looked like the fastest punt returner we've had since, say, Tariq Cohen, like the most potential danger. But at the same time, punt returns are something where, gosh, let's just put it this way: like you can't make a mistake on them and expect things to go well, right? Like I personally feel like, anyways, that's something where if Grant did this in another game, it could turn into a muff, it could turn into a safety. I don't know. Either way, I feel like him. You said him and Chris Tabor, like they've got to just make sure their rules are a little bit more square going into the Packers game, because the last thing the Bears need is a third phase mistake in that setting.
Yeah, I don't understand. The thing that bothers me is like, at one mistake, yeah, it's fine. You talk about it, you get it corrected. But I mean, two back-to-back mistakes, and it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, like they won, so it's hard not to harp on it. Like you don't want to harp on it, but it's just like they're just one of the things that you just don't do in football. And he did it twice. So I hope it doesn't continue. If they cut him, I wouldn't be surprised. But at the end of the day, like it's on the special teams coach, because I mean, you're either telling them to do it or allowing it to happen. One of the two.
That makes sense. I know one thing that I actually think, so you tell me if I'm just being too positive, which happens plenty of times, and you know that. But I do think that going into this Packers game, the Bears will have a better day protecting Justin Fields, because you mentioned this in the early part of the show. I do feel like Max Crosby, Carl Nassib, and Yannick Ngakoue were always going to be a real handful for the Bears, given the way they go about rushing the passer, whereas more power-based rushers like Preston Smith, Za'Darius Smith, Kenny Clark, and the rest of the Packers defense, or whatever's left of them and not hurt, is more suited to something that the Bears can handle. I don't know how they'll run the ball against them, but from a throwing perspective, I do feel like they're probably setting up to not call 62.1% of their plays as runs. You know what I mean?
Right, 100%. I mean, you definitely expect them not to give up as many pressures. I mean, they have 3 pass rushers better than anything the Packers have right now. The Packers are just in a disarray. Their best two defensive players are both gone. I think that game's honestly wide open. They just need to somehow find a way to cover Devontae Adams at all costs, bracket him, hold him, do whatever you can. Yes, I mean, just the one thing you can't allow happen is to have Devontae Adams beat you. I honestly, I wish CBS had a better product so I could know how they stopped Darren Waller. But we'll get to all 22 and talk about it later.
I mean, you bring that up, we can cycle back to defense. We heard Third and Renfro's name, I think, once. We didn't see Darren Waller make a noticeable impact. Henry Ruggs caught a couple of balls, but either way, that Raiders team was loaded with a lot more receiving talent than I think Bears fans that didn't know came away with it. You know what I mean? Like, whether it was Sean Desai Magic or Eddie Jackson, Jalen Johnson, even Kendall Vildor showing a little more than we anticipated, I would have expected the Raiders to force feed Waller, for instance, certainly more than they did. And instead, it kind of felt like let's put it this way, right? This, for some reason, Brandon, reminds me of basketball. You could tell me whether this is ridiculous or not, but a really good defender makes the shooter in front of him shoot poorly, right? It's not as if the guy doesn't take shots. They just seem to make either poor decisions or their accuracy's off. You know, they have an off night. And I can't tell, and I'm dying to see the All-22 because I want to know whether the Raiders just played badly or whether Sean Desai's defense pushed them into playing badly, because the latter says really good things about a team whose defense I was really worried about going into this season, but they've consistently impressed, you know?
Well, yeah, and that's one of the things, like, while the D-line did play really well, they weren't getting to Derek Carr early and often. Like, they were getting to Derek Carr late. Like, they were getting coverage sacks, which means they were playing really well in coverage, which, I mean, makes me want to be a football geek and get the all-22 as soon as possible just to see how they do it. Because the thing is about the Raiders is they have Darren Waller. No one can guard him. I mean, you might bracket him, but then you got third Renfro, who it looks about unstoppable. I mean, you saw when Roquan was one-on-one with him, he nearly sat Roquan down. And, I mean, that's just what he's doing to about everyone nowadays, but they somehow stopped both of them. I don't know how many yards Waller had, but his performance was definitely underwhelming. And I just think it was a good performance overall.
Waller, 4 for 45, well below his standard on 8 targets. Renfro, okay, so my once thing was way off. I clearly was spacing out during defensive games or something, because he was 6 for 56, Ruggs 3 for 51, Bryan Edwards 2 for 22. Should have been a lot more from him. But yeah, I'm with you, because this Raiders team, it felt disjointed. It felt like they didn't run the ball particularly well. They only ended the game with 71 yards off of 22 attempts, so it wasn't for a lack of trying. But even so, I mean, this was a defensive performance that I feel like is probably going to go unnoticed by a lot of the league, chalked up to it's the Raiders. But this is one that I feel like we've now seen them, Brandon. They stacked a great defensive day against Cincinnati with a great defensive day against Cleveland with a kind of less than awesome defensive day against the Lions that they got away with because the Lions kind of helped them out with some of their turnovers. Quinn a really nice play to erase an otherwise not so great drive, and then another really nice day from Las Vegas. I don't know. Am I wigging out here, or is this starting to turn into the trimmings of another good defensive unit in Chicago?
No, it definitely does. I mean, when you have a D-line that's that great and 3 pretty good coverage guys, talking about Roquan, Jalen Johnson, Eddie Jackson, and I mean, it has all the makings of a good defense. As long as they can stop the run, which they did today. They held Jacobs to 3.2 yards per carry, which is outstanding. And then, I mean, Derek Carr, he's being talked about in the MVP conversations. They held him to a QBR of 28. I think the average QBR is like 53. They only threw for 206 yards, 0 touchdowns, 5.9 yards per attempt. I mean, every way you put it, they shut down the Raiders' offense.
Yep. And speaking of, because I know you're a defensive guy, help Bears fans with their catharsis, right? Did you think that Roquan's PI call was PI versus face guarding? And did you feel for Roquan on that unnecessary roughness call in the red area?
But here's where a lot of people get mixed up. A lot of people, football fans, obviously played football, right? High school football is wildly popular. And in high school football, you can't face guard, which means even if you don't touch them, you can't face guard them. But in the NFL, you're allowed to face guard. Now, here's what Roquan did. He face guarded, but while you're face guarding, you cannot touch the receiver because you're assuming if you're face guarding, you're not looking back at the football. You can't touch the receiver while not looking for the football. You can't touch the receiver at all 5 yards down the field. So, I mean, it's one of those things where he was in great position. He would have just loved if he could have held back a little bit, but it's 30 yards downfield. It's hard not to do that. I mean, he was in great position. Hopefully he can just learn from it, and hopefully he can accept the penalty as a penalty and learn from it and grow from it.
What about that unnecessary roughness call? I always feel for these guys in those settings, right? I think this is either the second or the third time that Roquan's been tagged on almost exactly this kind of play, where Roquan's in his zone, a wide receiver catches the ball falling down, Roquan takes 1 or 2 steps to his, in this case it was his left, sometimes it's been his right, and puts his shoulder into the guy, and what do you know? It's his face now, you know? And nobody wants high hits, right? Nobody wants anybody getting hit in the face, and I don't want to excuse anything, but I do always feel for the defender where he's reacting literally as fast as he can, and that wide receiver is a lot taller than Roquan Smith. That shouldn't be the head and neck area, but often it ends up being that way because receivers adjust to the ball wherever it is, you know?
Right. I mean, he's just reacting. He's trying to blow up the receiver. He's trying to knock the ball loose. and it's really hard not to aim high when you're trying to knock the ball loose. But at the end of the day, it was a penalty. I think they correctly called it a penalty. It's just one of those unfortunate plays.
Right. One thing that I do also feel like, Brandon, just to talk about it in Roquan's case, frankly, we could apply this to Eddie Jackson, we could apply this to Roquan Smith, Khalil Mack, so on and so forth. If anything, I feel like the funny part about this game is, so Roquan takes a penalty, 2 penalties specifically, right? And yet, I feel like we can sometimes expect defenders to be, I don't want to say perfect, but better on every down than the guy across from him. And based on the rest of the league, I don't feel like that's the expectation. You talked about the Roquan accepting that as a penalty and trying to grow from it a little bit. I mean, next time, chances are the receiver doesn't like stutter back towards the ball and it ends up being a clean face guard, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but you'll take the guy in position to make a play every time and live with the penalties here and there, because when you end up holding the defense or holding the offense to what probably coulda, shoulda, woulda been 16 points, it's still a great day, right?
Right. You're 100% going to always take the player that's in position, that knows what he's doing, versus a guy like Tashawn Gibson being way out of position, having his back turned to Henry Ruggs. You're always going to take the guy that's in position.
That's what I figured. What funny thing, it looks like the chat's saying that Roquan Smith, when he was asked about the penalty, he said, "Oh yeah, I thought that was BS." Makes sense.
Yeah,
it's a very modern.
I expect it.
Yeah, you expect the.
I don't even know which one they're. Right? I don't even know which one they're talking about. They're talking about BS on
it's bad.
On that. On the base garden or the unnecessary roughness. Because I think they were both good calls by the refs, but just unfortunate.
Right. Either way, I feel like there was a lot of positives. I can't remember if we've talked about it yet. I think the most impressive thing I saw from Fields, besides his toughness, which I really felt like spoke for itself, I love the fact that Fields was able to convert or at least make the right play on as many of those 3rd and longs as he could. This was a game where I really feel like, I don't want to use the term soul-searching that implies it's worse than it is, but if there's something the Bears could get better at between this game and the Packers game, it is the way they handle those 2nd and longs. Even so, I remember the play after Justin Fields left the game. Andy Dalton comes in for a series, converts a 3rd down. Thank you, Andy. Wasn't going to go with the podcast without mentioning it. Hands the ball back to Justin Fields, who ends up with a 3rd and 6. He delivered a really nice strike to Allen Robinson, keeps the drive going, converts into a score. Later in the game, as I again don't want to act like the game was getting away from the Bears, but they could really use those extra 3 points to make it a 17-9 game. It was at the time. Fields delivers that 3rd and 11 strike to Mooney, really nice to keep the drive going, keeps those chains moving. I don't know. I feel like 111 yards and 1 touchdown, which was a really nice throw in and of itself, is not going to draw any eyes. But from a young quarterback perspective, I would have expected more mistakes than we got from Fields. I don't know. I was impressed. Lowercase I impressed, but impressed nevertheless, you know?
Right. I mean, the thing to take away from this is they had the lead the entire game. So, I mean, they didn't need him to make an exceeding amount of plays, especially when they're as successful as they were running the ball. They didn't really need him to make plays. Now, the thing that was so encouraging to see was him making those plays on 3rd down, because what a lot of people don't understand is on 3rd downs, that's when you really have the scheme throws. You're calling a specific play to throw to a specific receiver. And it seemed like every time they were in those scenarios, he was able to connect with his receivers and convert it. Now, the one thing I will say is they got to figure out some way to use him running the football that is in his best interest, because it just seems like every single time they're in these spots, they're like QB power, QB sweep, plays that he's just not equipped to run. Like, he's 6'3", 230 pounds. He's not that type of guy. He's not Josh Allen. He's not lowering his shoulder. He's not Trevor Lawrence. He's not lowering his shoulder. He doesn't want any of that. That's why you see him turn his back on the half spin and just expose his ribs like that. So I just think there are other ways that they can use him like get him in open space to be able to use his 4.4 speed. I think there are ways they can use him on boot plays and 12 personnel where they can block the defensive end instead of just letting him free, and so they can get him to the edge and let him make plays that way.
Talking about that boot, Brandon, I mean, so the Bears only ran one bootleg, which I'm sure there are going to be plenty of people that are like, no bootlegs, but let's set that aside for now. I did laugh out loud at how Fields very casually just blew right by the defensive end that was there to try to contain him. I mean, it's silly when we talk about this guy who's Justin Fields is, you said it well, 6'3", 235, runs a 4.4, and he feels really reluctant to run. Like, whereas Josh Allen, whatever his measurables are, will throw his shoulder, and Kyler Murray will run whenever he gets the chance because he knows what a weapon it is, it really feels as if Justin Fields wants to throw the ball. He wants to make that 20 to 25 yard, even 15-yard intermediate throw. Like, he doesn't want to check down. If anything, that's part of why I would also tip my cap to the first major play that Justin Fields made, a simple check down to Damian Williams that Williams was able to turn to the 13 yards off a vertical concept that was right on time. First down, and the first real major first down the Bears had after Yannick Ngakoue's foul. But I say this to say, Brandon, what is kind of funny about watching Fields, especially with the creativity that the Bears could employ trying to put him out on boots, I've seen it. It's really common in the NFL right now to drop that edge defender, the one who's away from the run anyways, right? So say a team is under center, they run a play action boot where the running back would run to the left, but then the quarterback wheels around and runs to the right, because obviously you always boot the quarterback away from the action of the run. It feels as if defensive coordinators are starting to make it a staple rule to just have that backside edge defender just penetrate down in case it's a play action or in case it's a boot to try to take that away. And even so, this is now Myles Garrett, who he did this to, and whoever that was, I'll have to check the tape for it, where he just ran right by him. Which is cool. At least it opens up opportunity, you know?
Right. Yeah, exactly. You want more of those opportunities because those are situations to where you can run. The only thing that sucks about those is it kind of limits the route concepts that you do run. A lot of them are just basic levels concepts, so it's relatively easy to pick up as long as the team's not playing man coverage. So it's tough, but they'll get better as the season goes along. But we're quite a bit of ways away from the bye week, so they need to. The hard part is they're going to be installing plays every single week during the week, and they only have 3 days of practice.
Yep, and I gotta say though, before we wrap up, Brandon, now Fields might enter what I mean. If we thought that things weren't at a fever pitch, the Bears take on the Packers, and if memory serves, they take on the Packers at home. Like, somebody check me on that here in the chat, just so that I don't talk out of my like this. God forbid for the rest of the NFL and Twitter and whatnot, Fields wins this game, which, like you said, Kevin King starting, which is really all you need to know, right? This game is an opportunity. And it's an opportunity the Bears really could come out on the other end with a win. And what a way for Justin Fields to kind of announce himself in at least the Bears fandom, right? Being what feels like the first quarterback to beat the Packers in God, I don't want to know how long.
Right. Yeah, the Packers are 4-point favorites on the road in Chicago. Very, very interesting game. Very important game. I believe this would be for first place in the division, which is obviously huge. Whenever you can get momentum within the division, that's certainly a good thing. It's gonna be a tough game, but I'm sure the Bears will be prepared.
Speaking of the division, before we close up, I have to ask you about the absolute agony fest that was the Lions and the Vikings game. What did you think of one of the funniest football games I've watched in a while?
I mean, it was just the Lions in typical fashion, fighting back, quote unquote, fighting back, and then losing, just finding a way to lose any way that they possibly can. It's just like Like everybody and their mother wants to give Dan Campbell every single participation trophy, every single game. And it's like, all right, well, let me look at the record real quick. All right, yeah, that does say 0-5. All right, let me look at point differential. Oh, yeah, minus 40. What is that? 5th worst in the league? All right, yeah, still doing pretty bad.
I mean, it's so funny, too, because I feel like Vikings fans weren't happy that it was as close a shave as it was, because the Vikings certainly went from at least modestly in control to not in control at all, losing and needing a game-winning field goal, which isn't even common in Minnesota, just given their kicker trouble. So, funny game to watch on all sides of it. And a goofy lead-in as the NFC North potentially comes to a head here next week. Final thoughts on the Bears-Raiders game? Go.
My final thoughts are it was a great game, great win for the team. I'm sure this team is very, very happy to get this win and excited for next week for first place in the division, no matter what point it is in the season.
Absolutely. I mean, my final thoughts are simple, Brandon. I came into this season wanting to see Fields develop. That was really all that mattered. And I was going to take whatever season the Bears got. Given what happened in Cleveland just a couple weeks ago, I know I was starting to look at the rest of the schedule thinking, oh gosh, how many more games are they going to win? But this was a plucky contest. I mean, whether it was just a couple nice bounces of the ball or what, the Bears came out. They got the lead, they kept the lead, and I can't say they looked dominant because they didn't, but they did look relatively in control. I mean, this could be a team that, especially if Justin Fields develops a little ahead of schedule, could be more dangerous in December than we think they will. Now it's just a matter, in my opinion anyways, to see if they can steal a win from one of their next 3 opponents. Because if they can leave that stretch 4-4, I don't want to say they've got a shot too loudly, but at least it looks better than the likely 3-5, 3-6 I think we were all looking at going into the bye week, you know?
Right. 100%. I mean, yeah, they definitely have a tough stretch. They're going into their toughest stretch of the year, but I think they're catching the teams at the right time. Packers are all beat up. 49ers are all beat up. The Buccaneers don't have a cornerback worth his salt on their squad right now. That's healthy. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things develop. It'll be interesting to see how Fields develops, his offense develops as a whole. But all positives from here.
All positives from here. Brandon, thanks for jumping on. It's like 9:04, which only matters because I'm trying to suppress a yawn. So thank you for jumping on Post Sportsbook. Where can folks find you online?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, you can find me at BRobNFL on Twitter and at the Defensive Download on YouTube. Hoping to get something up on there this week.
I certainly hope so. And it better not just be Allen Robinson blocking, right? Or not blocking. We could do better than that.
It's not the blocking YouTube channel.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks so much, Brandon.
All right, thanks for having me.
And that does it. Awesome. We are clear. I'll go ahead and cut and print that. You guys are great. Brandon, if you want to stick around for a little bit of Q&A, I have no idea if you've got the YouTube link pulled up to where you can see the chat.
I'm down. I just pulled it up.
Perfect. Folks, fire some questions in. I've got a little bit before I collapse. But overall, I mean, we kind of talked about it, Brandon. I do feel like this was a game I was really trying to mentally prepare myself, Brandon, practically like trying to stir up concrete, something to help steel myself, right, for the Bears to just take a beating. Because every time over the last 3 years, basically 2019 to 2020, every time something's gone right, something goes really wrong the week after that, you know? But the Bears actually stacked pretty good weeks, which I think might have impressed me more than anything else. But maybe that's just from my, it's not even my analytical side at that point. That's my I've been hurt too many times before side, you know?
Well, yeah. It's just how this team is going right now. It's just they have a certain amount of holes, and they've stayed relatively healthy. It's like, when does this start stuff start to fall apart, and it's like, well, the quarterback's not necessarily carrying the team, but they're squeaking out wins. So I mean, at the end of the day, like a win's a win.
Absolutely.
They're going to be 3-2, happy as hell, ready. Because the thing is, like, you're not going to be motivated going into the next week, having to travel back from Las Vegas when you're 2-3 coming off an ass beating.
Especially when you're going into
being 3-2, possible to be in first place of the division. I mean, you're all motivated in the world to get in the tape study, to start preparing for the Packers.
It's so silly you mentioned that, Brandon, because you're right. You know, like the difference in just mental attitude, right? Between we're 3-2 and all it takes is a lucky bounce, right? If Cincinnati can hold the Green Bay Packers to 22, like turn on the Cincinnati tape, because you remember what we did with those guys? Right. Yes. Exactly. But like it's the sort of thing where I look at this and I don't necessarily think that the Bears should win. I don't know. It's that weird dichotomy, right? Between trying to pick a game based on the chalk or trying to pick a game knowing that it'll never quite go the way the chalk wrote it out. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah. I mean,
I also can't help but think, as much as I love Trey Lance, it's probably good that they're getting them with Trey Lance while they're still figuring themselves out, because at least that just increases the variance, you know?
I mean, I thought he played surprisingly well today. I know the Cardinals secondary isn't that great, but they've been getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. They got a lot of pressure on him today, and I actually think he held up pretty well.
I think he held up. Actually, I'm not even going to pretend I watched the game, because I didn't. I watched sporadic highlights here and there, and it seemed like he didn't play badly, you know? But definitely one where, I don't know, it's not, I don't want to make the argument here, because it's not true, that I'm somehow more scared of Garoppolo than I am of Lance. I more just find myself thinking that these guys at this point, you put it pretty well, Brandon, they're super motivated to go find that one crease that they can use to just squeeze out a 24-22 win over Green Bay or San Fran or Tampa Bay. You know what I mean?
I would definitely say that I would be more scared of San Francisco with Jimmy Garoppolo, just because there's, in a game with Jimmy Garoppolo, there's going to be less variance to the game. In a game with Trey Lance, you can get all the variance in the world. He overthrew a wide open receiver for a pick on their first drive. He got stuffed on 4th and goal at the 1 yard line, but he got stuffed on, it was 4th and goal at the 1, but he got stuffed on like the 1/4 yard line. Oof. So, I mean, you're going to get all the variance in the world when it comes to Trey Lance. And honestly, like it's like, if you're going into a Super Bowl, who would you rather have, Andy Dalton or Justin Fields? It's like, well, Andy Dalton's probably the better quarterback right now, but I would rather have the variance of having Justin Fields, because you're going to have all the upside in the world to have a great game, which is what you would need to win the game. So if I'm playing against that team, just give me the conservative guy. Give me the guy that's going to dump it off to the running back and not throw the ball downfield.
And speaking of, Brandon, I mean, you talked about it. It's going to be an awesome game. Like, Bears and San Fran, like, I hope it lives up to the Lance versus Fields billing, because, I don't know, watching the Houston game today reminded me how much fun rookie on rookie can be, just because they're weird football games. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the same kind of fun and good as Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, but it's fun nevertheless, you know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's going to be the talk of the town all week long.
All week.
I'm glad it's in Chicago. That's definitely a good thing, and it's an early game as well. So you got a West Coast team traveling to the East Coast. It's not necessarily East Coast, but it's East Coast time because it's early. So you're playing at 10 a.m. And let me tell you, every Sunday waking up for the games, it's not enjoyable. So I can only imagine they're showing up to they're showing up to the stadium for them. It's at like 6:30 in the morning.
Right.
That's what it feels like for them. So that's definitely a big advantage for them.
I mean, it's the circadian rhythm stuff. It's silly, right? But it's the kind of thing that makes a huge difference, just like we saw 2 years ago where Phillip Rivers and the Chargers played a terrible game in Chicago, you know? Like, that team didn't end up going on to do much, but that was really where I would say the dam broke as the Chargers in that one. It felt like they tried to give that game away with everything they could do. The Bears just wouldn't take it, which is neither here nor there at this point. But it does open up, like you're kind of getting at, this just really intriguing stretch where I almost want to call it extra credit light, where the Bears don't have no expectations. You don't want to see them get blown out by anybody other than probably Tampa Bay, who they put a licking on Miami today for a reason. But even so, like, I mean, they win one game out of the next three, they've done a great job. They win 2 games, they've massively overperformed. Like, this is one where pretty much all they got to do is not get shuttered, you know?
Right, 100%. I mean, if they win the first game and the third game, you're looking at first place in the division. So, I mean,
first place in the division in a really tough schedule with the Vikings twice, the Lions, and the Giants left on your schedule, which I only point out because right now, and maybe it's felt like this for a little while, Brandon, but the Bears seem to have an impeccable record against the teams they're supposed to beat and a hilariously bad record against the teams that they are very clearly supposed to lose to. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, Joe Ostrowski always tweets out every game Matt Nagy's record against like when they're favorites versus when they're underdogs. And when they're underdogs, Matt Nagy's like 1-15. I think he's 2-15 now, and like 1-12 against the spreader. Something crazy like that. They just don't perform well as underdogs.
They were underdogs in this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
There you go. And not to mention, another game that I think will be really interesting is that Pittsburgh game, which I point out because that's a game that it feels like 17 points wins. I mean,
as long as you can guard Deontay Johnson, like that Steelers team has nothing.
No, they got nothing.
I don't know what quarterback is more frustrating to watch right now, Ben Roethlisberger or Jacoby Brissett.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Zach Wilson in there too.
No, because the thing is about him, like, I know he's a rookie. I have zero expectations.
I gotcha.
Like, that team is supposed to be bad. It's like the Dolphins, like, they have stuff. They have everything, really, besides an offensive line and a quarterback. And same thing in Pittsburgh. Like, they have a good defense. They have really good wide receivers. The same thing. Terrible offensive line. God-awful quarterback. That is just a terrible human being.
Right. I feel like every time I turn on Jacoby Brissett, Brandon, he is hilarious to watch because about half the time I see him doing things that are just ridiculous, right? Like 4th down, a 22-yard pass to keep a drive alive, or absolute last second of, what was it, the Raiders game, I think it was. He scores a touchdown to send it to overtime, needs the 2-point conversion, scores at 2, sends him to overtime, converts with nothing. And today, I know in the limited action I actually watched of that game, he completed like 2 or 3 passes basically just with guys all over him, like all actively holding on to him, and he'd complete him anyways. And yet, there's the bad parts too, right?
Well, he's either throwing it immediately to the flats, or he's immediately bailing out of the pocket and just throwing it wherever. So it's like he is pretty damn athletic for a quarterback, but it's like that offense is never on schedule.
No,
never ever on schedule.
It'll be interesting to see how Tua comes back to that. By the way, that's a team that I feel like is better than it's showing right now.
Yeah, it's a rough spot just because, Tua's dealing with every injury, and an offensive line is just awful. Jalen Waddle, I think, dropped like 4 passes today.
Oof.
It was just like I don't know.
I
It's
got
not much to come to. If Deshaun Watson ends up getting traded there, that would be nice to see because he's someone who can operate with a really poor offensive line.
And we didn't talk about it enough, Brandon. At least I don't feel like I talked about enough of my disgust of so the Chiefs Bills game is at halftime and it's delayed. I don't know if you knew that, but it is due to
I was wondering why the second half wasn't starting.
it's delayed due to a storm. And so they're going back through everything that happened today. And oh my gosh, watching the Bengals continue to not beat the Packers was so unbelievably infuriating right before the Bears game started. Like, what kind of voodoo magic do they have going on with Aaron Rodgers that for crying out loud, he gets sacked, he converts 3rd and 16, no problem. Joe Burrow, who at least has a solid decision-making capability, throws it right to a linebacker on the run. You know what I mean? Like, ugh, I can't believe they didn't win that game. And it would have helped the Bears out a lot, sure. But just from a football perspective, that had to take at least a year of Rodgers' like devil juju magic away from him, right?
Yeah, neither team could make any kicks. I think there were like 4 or 5 straight missed kicks.
There were.
which is just absurd. That was I don't know, terrible but exciting game. Jamar Chase just looked like the best player on the field. When Devontae Adams and Rodgers weren't on the field, like he was legitimately the best player on the field.
There we go, Brandon.
Making every single play.
2 for 2 now on me, let alone anybody else, just completely overthinking the wide receiver 1 of the class. You know what I mean? Like, what was it, 2 years ago? Justin Jefferson looked insane, and a whole bunch of people, myself included, went, yeah, but how much of that's Joe Burrow, right? And then Jamar Chase comes out. He's been outstanding. Had a terrible preseason, but he's looked outstanding as a rookie. They're fun to follow. The rookie wideouts, that is.
He is on pace for like the greatest rookie season of all time, which is crazy because Justin Jefferson basically just had arguably the greatest rookie season of all time. And like Moss had the other one that's even in the conversation. And he's on pace to completely blow them both out of the water. Let me see.
With an extra game, no less.
Exactly. He has 456 yards so far.
Gracious.
And
what?
That's absolutely insane.
That's nigh on 100 yards a game. That's like 90 yards a game.
It is. He's on pace for 1,500 yards. Not to mention he has 5 touchdowns. He's on pace for 17 touchdowns.
Oh my gosh. As long as Bro doesn't get hurt, because he got close to it today.
Oh my! Did you see that hit?
Yes.
He was like 6 yards short of the first down.
Yeah. With
2 defenders right around him. It was like, dude, like, I'm sorry. Like, I know you're an NFL quarterback, but you're in a regular human being's body. Like, you're not some supreme athlete. These guys will hurt you.
Even if, I mean, so today was, I forgot to talk about this on the podcast, but like today, Brandon, was a stark reminder about how like, why don't people in the NFL sneak more often? And then I watched Roquan Smith get a running start and just absolutely smash Derek Carr.
Murder him.
Totally legal, but I'm pretty sure he knocked him out for a little bit. And they had to hit him with the smelling salts on the sideline or something. Like, that was one of those where I was like, oh, that's why. That's exactly why they don't do it. And again, like, so grit, determination, toughness, people wanting to win, right? They're fun things to watch. They're easy things to cheer for. And even I am sitting here, Brandon, just like, Joe Burrow, you are trying really hard for something that isn't worth the risk you're putting on your body diving there. Like, that's why you slide, you know? And I don't want to ding a guy for wanting or for trying to want it more than everyone else, but also you should probably dive for first downs instead of for random yards to set up third and manageable that end up sending you to the hospital. But I don't know. I just want Joe Burrow to have the long career that I think his play warrants he'll have. Will he have a long top 10 quarterback career? Let's debate that instead of will Burrow put himself out of the league. You know what I mean? Because that's the kind of hit that I don't think you can take long term. You could say that about any quarterback at any point. Don't take that one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because it's just like the Bengals are like actually a decent football team. Like they have all the receivers in the world. Their defense is actually playing really, really well.
Yeah.
And Chidobe Awuzie came out of nowhere, and he's having one of the best seasons for a cornerback this year. And it's like you start to look at the guys that Allen Robinson's win against. You're like, oh, geez, like he's won against Denzel Ward, now Casey Hayward, Chidobe Awuzie, Jalen Ramsey. The only break he got was last week against the Lions. They don't have anybody.
And then Darnell Mooney had a huge game.
Exactly.
It's
next week he gets a break because Jair Alexander's not gonna be out there.
I hope they go up against. Or I can't wait. Do you know what a cathartic feeling it would be, Brandon, to watch the Bears actually throw on the Packers instead of vice versa exclusively? Like, that'd be so fun. Now, who knows if it'll happen? But let's see. In 3Z's World talks about how, I don't know, by the way, whether maybe you do, Brandon. Are the Bears still leading the NFL in sacks? Did they ever give Gibson the sack that he deserved? Like,
Wait, what?
What?
They didn't give him that sack?
So they gave Gibson. So to be clear, we're talking about the strip sack from Goff, right?
Oh, okay.
That didn't get credited as a sack, even though in every other score sheet it does. Does that make sense? Like,
no, I'm off. What happened?
Oh, okay. So last week's game against the Lions, right? Gibson gets a regular sack, as I'm sure you remember, and he also had a play where Goff stepped up in the pocket, started to run, and Gibson swatted the ball away, and the ball literally hit the ground, rolled over, and bounced right up into Goff's hands again. It looked like something out of a rewind, you know? But then Goff caught the ball after it had been stripped from him and ran with it for a gain of 6 yards, right?
Well, I mean, technically that's a catch, though.
So, it hit the... Wait, hang on, what?
It hit the ground or no?
It did hit the ground.
I don't know why I can't remember this.
Hit the ground, bounced twice, bounced right up into Goff's hands. He grabbed it, he ran with it, right?
Did he get past the line of scrimmage?
Yes. He, in fact, gained 6 yards. But it was post-fumble. Like, the fumble happened totally behind the line of scrimmage. And every time I've ever heard that, thank you, Johan Guevara, by the way, for subscribing. Every time I've ever seen that scenario, Brandon, that's credited as a sack to the edge rusher.
Is it?
Like, I've always seen it to where the edge rusher gets a sack as soon as the fumble happens. And whatever happens after the fumble, like whoever recovers it, whatever happens, that's all considered after a sack, if that makes sense. Like, Danny Trevathan got a sack on Russell Wilson back, 2019, when he ran up and forced a fumble right there. Like, that's considered a sack, is the way I've always seen it scored. Now, maybe they changed it, but that's something that I know I've always seen. Is that news to you?
Yeah, it is, honestly.
But either way, the Bears pick up 3 sacks this week. I think they've now got 18 on the season within 6, which is really impressive for a team that, I don't know about you, I don't feel like they're generating near as much pressure as leading the league in NFL, or leading the league in sacks says that they are. And yet, they are going to get a sack taken away from them because one of them happened on a 2-point conversion, and those don't count as sacks, they just count as conversion denials. I mean,
I don't think they counted that though.
That's my point. Like they didn't count it, and I'm saying like maybe they should. It is a play. Like I get not crediting as a touchdown, but it's still TFL. I don't know. Debate. Who cares? Like it's stats past a certain point. It's more to say that I'm impressed. I want to hear what you're thinking. That the Bears are generating opportunities and they're also cashing in on the opportunities that they generate. Like it's not about creating crazy pressure. It's about creating single siloed opportunities. And the Bears have just consistently done it at this point. Like we're 5 games in and they're still doing well at it.
Right. Yeah. And the thing that's really encouraging is Khalil Mack now looked really good. And Robert Quinn continues to look really, really good. Like I can't get over how good. Like now that we're not on the podcast, like if you told me tomorrow he's gonna get hit with the PED penalty, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like you tell me he's juicing, that makes sense. Honestly, that makes sense because the dude is just moving at a completely different speed, and I feel like he's ever moved. Like, yeah, he's rushed the passer really well before, but like it's every single play he's moving well. Like he had a TFL on
early
a run
start
play,
of the game.
on a run play. on a run play where he bent around and like to be able to do that quickly on a run play.
He looks like he's 25. I mean,
looks like a defensive player of the year.
Man's 33. You know, like this is insane. It's incredible. And not to mention,
if you look at his hairline, you're like, this ain't the same guy.
Yeah. I mean, and at the same time as that, Brandon, Travis Gibson's he's developing into a nice little force of his own. You know what I mean? Like on a team that didn't have Quinn and Mack on it, he might be starting. Like, tell me where you think I'm just getting way too far ahead of myself. Like he might be a reserve OLB3 in plenty of cases. I don't think he'd start for everyone, but when he's getting his opportunities, he's putting together good little rushes for a sophomore that was a 4th round pick, which is rare enough to find success at edge rusher anyways. Like he looks like a project that actually paid off at this point.
The thing that's so gratifying watching him play is, for me, not even the production. Like he's producing, but it's not even that. It's seeing him grow on what he did last year. Because the thing is, he came into the season super raw. So
raw.
It's like
he was an interior defensive lineman last season. Or not last season, but his final season in college, right? He was an interior defender. And they kicked him out to the edge.
Right, and he's in not even that. He's kicked out to the edge, and he's in a 2-point every single play. Like you saw how much it bothered Robert Quinn. This guy just jumps right in and performs like this. It's and the thing is like he's another guy. Like it seemed like he put on 15 pounds. Like you can see the strength on him in every single play. Like every single play, like that sack he made today. It seemed like as soon as he put his hands on the tight end, you could just see based on how the tight end reacted, like he probably got wide-eyed just by reacting to the amount of force that he put on him. And then from there, he just flung him out the way and tackled Derek Carr.
Brandon, did you ever watch, back when you were younger, like Dragon Ball Z or stuff like that?
I love Dragon Ball Z. I still watch it to this
Awesome. So you know that anime moment where like whether it's a protagonist or an antagonist, they like suddenly realize that the person in front of them is just tremendously more powerful than them, and like you're saying, get all wide-eyed and go like the whole like that kind of thing. That looked like it was what happened, where he knew it was over the instant that he got his hands on him. I mean, he got erased.
It's funny that you bring up Dragon Ball Z because I could like bring up an exact moment of Dragon Ball Z. It's like where Dragon Ball Z. I feel like where Trunks is about to fight Cell after Vegeta, and then he realizes that he's way stronger than it is. Is like, yeah, I just give up. You can just kill me.
I mean, It's cool because I think what was it? Oh my gosh, I can't remember the guy's name that was calling the game. It's Charles something. But so he mentioned that
Charles Davis?
Charles Davis, yes. Charles Davis was
I wasn't
like,
even listening.
there you go. Charles Davis at the talked about a pass rusher summit, and he was like, if you can't beat a tight end, like you just got to play better. Was basically what the guy was saying. I thought that was a great way to put it because I've kind of been thinking that, right? But hearing somebody in football officially say any edge rusher worth their salt should beat a tight end made me kind of it clicked with me. Because Robert Quinn, for instance, whenever you line a tight up against him, he just erases him. And that it helped. So to see Gibson, now here's what we got so far, Brandon. You know this just as well as I do. Gibson is beating tight ends. Gibson is beating people consistently in the third and fourth quarter of the preseason, right? Like, is he Khalil Mack? No. Nobody said that. But he's coming along. And being able to not give your opponent a break when you sub people out. You've talked about this before, Brandon. I feel like we've just got to keep saying it, right? Where it's like the scariest part about the Bears defensive line right now is that they are absolutely relentless. Especially say Hicks is healthy, right? Mack needs a break, you put in Gibson. Gibson's a really effective player. Hicks needs a break, you put in Goldman. Goldman's an effective player. You put in Mario Edwards. You put in
Mario.
Yeah, he struggled today, but we hope he bounces back. His flash plays were all negative today. Blackson's a good player. Tonga is a way better player than I would have anticipated a rookie to be. They just don't give you a break. And if you can't beat their starters, their backups aren't a lot easier to play against, And when what was it? Was it Tonga that was just eating JC Treader alive? It's the kind of thing where you look at that and it's like, I don't know where this team will go. But if they can keep that intensity up, that's the kind of thing that helps people start to feel better about that. That's the kind of thing where you're going to see on Twitter people be like, Duke Shelley and Kindle Vildor, they weren't really the problem I was anticipating. And it's like, well, part of that's just because the opposing defensive line cannot run the ball. And so, the opposing offensive line is generating nothing. Browns didn't run the ball well. Raiders didn't run the ball well. Lions, actually, they kind of did. That was a really weird down week for the defensive line. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. I have a feeling that San Fran has something cooked up for him, and Green Bay's going to be tough to stop. But I don't know. Every time I say that, immediately I catch myself, Brandon, and I get sad again because I'm like, making the Packers one-dimensional and saying, oh, you have to put it in Aaron Rodgers' hand every time. I'm like, that doesn't make things any better, does it? No. You put it in their best player's hands every play.
No, it's just like every time the ball's in his hands, it's like you just expect him to make a play.
Oh,
he's just making plays with Randall Cobb, who seems like he's been in the NFL for 15 years, and the Texans didn't even want him.
Right.
They thankfully traded him away. It's like, oh, you're going to take his contract?
Take him.
Go ahead. So it'll be interesting to see how, because you saw how Jalen Johnson was trailing Odell Beckham quite a bit, which I don't think it was talked about. But it'll be interesting to see if they do the same thing with Devontae Adams.
They're not ridiculous enough to think that Alec Ogletree or Kindle Vildor or Duke Shelley are good matchups against Devontae Adams, right?
I don't know. I'm always under the school of thought that you plan to bracket a receiver versus have someone trail him. And the way that Jalen Johnson plays, I just really worry about that matchup.
Oh, yeah. I was just as worried about the Odell Beckham Jr. matchup. Now, you could say I'm more worried about Devontae Adams. I'll hear where you're coming from. You know what I mean? But that I would tell you that Johnson did so much better against OBJ than I would have anticipated that I'm not stupid enough to think that he will lock Devontae down. But I'm just hoping, even if you take 20% of Devontae Adams' expected plays away, that's a big blow to a Packers offense that practically runs through him and him alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Him on third downs It's just like you're expecting him to get the ball, but it's just like, man, they ran the ball really well against the Bengals with basically their entire offensive line gone. I can't remember who said it on Twitter, but they talked to someone on the Packers coaching staff, and they said to him that they're a running football team, and that this was during this offseason, Aaron Rodgers coming off of his MVP season, and they're still saying they're a running football team. And you heard LaFleur last week. They asked him about Staley's comments about running the ball to set up the pass, and he said he always believes that running the ball sets up the pass, which just means that he wants to. It doesn't make him right, but it means that he wants to run the ball efficiently and effectively.
It's like the Greg Roman thing, right? Greg Roman's both a really creative, a really creative caller that finds a way to do a lot of creative things running the ball, whose only demerit in the eyes of some is that he likes to run the ball. You know what I mean? Like, it's that same catch-22, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just people waiting to not be a fan, and it's just like, I think I really hope that he just stays with Baltimore, because it's just, I think he's married into the best situation possible.
I think
he loves his he loves his quarterback runs, and Lamar Jackson is Lamar Jackson.
Exactly. I know one thing that we can talk about before we wrap up. So I made a comment on Twitter, Brandon, that it feels like the only Bears offensive lineman, for some reason, that's consistently getting to the second level. I don't know whether this is by scheme, by accident, or what, but it's James Daniels.
Yeah, I guess
it's like just James Daniels. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like James Daniels pops out. You're looking for white hair because you're anticipating that's going to be both guards, right? It's not, though. It's just Daniels. And that sweet spine buster he hit on that jumping defense, or like that linebacker, that was hilarious. You saw that, right?
Yeah, I'm really confused what that linebacker was trying to do. Because, like, the offensive lineman can't cut you downfield.
No.
So, like, that's not an option.
By the way,
go low on you. Why
did you see that against the Lions? Did you? This was one of the funniest things I've seen this year, Brandon. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I from today?
It was against the Lions last week. So it's funny you talk about cut blocking. I have to cut you off while you're on a roll, because Jason Peters found a weird loophole in the cut blocking rule.
What did he roll?
He just jumped in front of his feet, so he didn't touch him. He just jumped in the direction that he would otherwise move. Right?
Yeah. I mean, jump. Yeah. Usually what guys will do is they'll jump to like his face, and then they'll just roll. And it's like, well, I guess. And the thing is about him is he's 400 pounds.
He's so big.
So it's just like, no DB is gonna want you on his knees.
Right.
Because stopping that amount of force, like, it's just, he's a big dude.
But yeah, I mean, just off the top of your head, do you think it's a Mustipher thing? Like, Cody Whitehair is basically trying to make sure that Mustipher doesn't get bullied at the point of attack? Or, like, why is it just Daniels that's getting out in front of these things?
Well, thinking about how outside zone is designed, when you have a one tech on the side of Whitehair, he's going to be the guy that should be scooping, and it should be Mustipher that goes to the second level. Like, when you think about outside zone, it's either the center is scooping the three tech, which isn't going to happen with Mustipher, or it's going to be him going to the second level. And it's just, he's not getting to the second level because he's probably putting his hands on the D lineman for too long, and the D line's probably holding him, and his arms aren't long enough. He's not big enough to get off of them and to the second level.
By the way, that makes all the sense in the world. I can't wait to see it on the L22. Have you heard about this White Sox game and where we're at right now?
No, I have a strong distaste for the White Sox.
Ah, you're a Cubby. I mean, I already knew that.
Yeah.
Look, I'm a Texas Ranger, so I can pretend to be a White Sox fan because we have just...
I will not pretend.
We have been...
Will not.
Brandon, you have allegiance. The Rangers have been so unbearably bad for almost a decade at this point. We had one season where we won 40 one-run games and lost like 6 of them. Like, it was insane what the Rangers, they just squeezed their way into the playoffs, and then they got beat. So hearing that it's a 9-6 game in the 5th inning, that sounds like it's popping off.
Well, I hope they win just for the fact that I know that Ross has a 4-leg parlay all Chicago teams.
What?
So he took the Chicago Sky in the finals for this game. They were a dog. He took the Bears money line. They were obviously a big dog.
Obviously.
He took the Bulls in the preseason game. I'm assuming they won because they're talking about it. I haven't seen the score at all. I'm assuming they won. And then he has the White Sox money line.
What did I miss? Why were the Bears 5.5-point dogs? Like, I guess I thought that the Bears and the Raiders were always going to play a pretty tight game, you know? Like, I tend to think that I had a realistic idea of what the Raiders were. That just...
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me because, for one, the Raiders don't have a really good home field advantage. Like, this was, like, I think the 4th highest ticket in the NFL this season.
And it's because of the Bears fans.
Bears fans were buying tickets because they wanted to go to Vegas because this is their first time playing, like, first time that Chicago's playing in Vegas where fans are allowed.
Right.
So, I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think the Raiders will continue to struggle with that. But
just
yeah,
the spread kind of
5.5 points were allowed. It doesn't make sense because it's like if you flip. So say you give 2.5 points for home field, right?
Right.
So you take. I guess that doesn't make sense. That makes more sense
like
that way.
I just remember looking at the picking thing that I usually do, Brandon, and it gave me 5.5 points. I was like, that's an easy Bears pick. Like, easy. I mean, I don't want to be ridiculous here, but this is right around the season of, like, the time of the year where Derek Carr takes a turn for the worse. Like, blame the Raiders, blame Carr. I don't really care, you know? Like, usually Derek Carr starts to show cracks right around mid-October, pretty much right on schedule for exactly what happened. And so you've got the Carr defenders saying it's not his fault. You got the pro Carr, or the Carr, like,